What's up, everybody? My name is Keorapetse Magano. I'm sitting here with Andy, Mr. Cator himself, and today we'll be getting into a conversation about my life on his platform, and we're going to find out what's so interesting about me that deserves an interview. Hi, Andy.
That's pretty good. I like that. Hi, Kia. Thanks for welcoming me in my show, and I feel welcomed as well. So I think maybe without having to waste our time, let's just get maybe Kia to also introduce yourself. I mean, we already get the gist of it. You can hear, the smooth English and all those other great stuff. So, Kia, your time, please. Please introduce yourself and
Yes.
just where you grew up.
My name is Keorapetse Magano. I grew up in Rustenburg. I went to school there, kindergarten and high school. I then moved to the Free State where I did my university studies, and I did a communication science degree, majored in media studies and journalism. I did that for quite some time, actually. Straight in my first year of varsity, first month of varsity, I was already on radio, and that means I did radio for about just over 10 years. Everything from campus radio to regional commercial radio. And that's where I am right now.
How did the where you grow up influence what you are doing today, and how was your schooling in general, the high school going back?
Okay, so growing up, I actually wanted to do agricultural sciences, or basically any study in agriculture, or become a nurse. Those are my
Mhm.
influential my community influences rather. But when I got to university and being the first person at home to go to university, I realized that maybe the application process is more complicated than we took it for. So, even though I had applied for nursing and agricultural sciences, the marks were not ready, or my application was not ready by the time school started because it turned out I had to actually be on an extended program. The professor, his name was Naidu, was assisting students at the time, said to me, listen, your English marks looks really good. Why don't you do journalism? So my parents and I sat down and thought, well, let's give it a shot. I mean, what could go wrong? All we're going to do is support you however it turns out.
Mhm.
So that's how I got into journalism. It wasn't a lifelong
Mhm.
dream of mine. In fact, I only probably listened to one radio station and all I did was watch cartoons. But that's how I ended up in the industry of media. English probably wasn't something I looked at as a favorite language. It just looked like something compulsory that I had to do.
Okay.
But I really did enjoy math literacy. I did math literacy. I'm not a mathematical person. And this might blow a lot of people's minds, but I did math
Mhm.
literacy, physics, and life science. And life science was my other favorite subject. So yeah, it was life science and
I
math
see.
literacy that really got me through school. And I think it's also the teachers that were teaching the subjects at the time that made it a very hospitable language. I mean,
Mhm.
hospitable studies to get into. So yeah.
In high school, what did you come up maybe across any challenges that you think are interesting to share with anyone else?
So in high school, the challenges I did face actually was, I want to say, lack of understanding. So I grew up in a household where whatever goes, goes, right? So I remember it was high school and my classmates and my grade mates were doing these open days in these different universities, and I absolutely had no interest. I was just like, no, I don't want to go far away. I don't understand what's going on. I don't understand what those scores that you need are and what is a degree, what is a diploma. I didn't understand any of that. You understand? On another challenge was, well, I mean, insecurities. Everybody has insecurities. I didn't have it all figured out. I knew that I wanted to do this, but I didn't understand what it actually meant
Mhm.
and what how much effort I'd have to put in. I'm a kid who went to kindergarten because the parents said go to kindergarten, go to primary school because it's the next thing after that, go to high school is the next thing after that. But the most daunting thing for me was leaving home and going to varsity and actually trying to figure out these PhDs, postgrads, this and that. And every time open days would happen on my campus or on school grounds, just had no interest because I didn't understand what people
Mhm.
were saying. Even though I was at a good school, it's just that lifestyle wasn't instilled in me that university is the next step. I think for some people, the advantage is that you grow up in an environment where your parents might have studied in university or your cousins might have gone to university and they were always advising you on the difference between this qualification and the next qualification. Whereas I was just a kid who wanted to watch cartoons. I really just wanted to watch cartoons. I really just wanted to go sit under a tree on a farm. And I didn't understand, like, why do I have to leave town? Why can't I just do this in my own hometown? And the other influence is that in my hometown, we didn't have a university. We still don't. And those are the challenges I honestly faced. Even though I say I did have insecurities, I was a very confident kid. I was a very dramatic kid. You know, I did my choir, I did my hockey, I played my netball, to the best of my abilities and stuff like that. You know, I was a culture kid. I know one of the certificates I did get was for team support. Like I would be that kid if there's a hockey game, I'm there with them in the morning and we're going to play hockey. And I was just like, I will bring the water if I have to, you know? Just staying in the culture of being committed to something and having responsibilities and supporting others was all I did. So varsity and the concepts around it just was such a challenge for me. And they still are actually. I did get one degree and I still sometimes feel like, what now? You had a degree in media studies and journalism as a major. What happens now? What do you do with that degree? Where do you go from there? You know? So yeah, those are the challenges I did face. Lack of understanding after high school.
Were you just as scared of going to university, or you were just not so interested?
In high school, I wasn't very informed in further education. I was limited, and this is probably only
Okay.
to an individual's ignorance. It's not that everybody wasn't afforded that, but it wasn't of any interest to me directly. I was a social butterfly, yes, some people might say that. What interested me was what I could see. So if it is out of sight, it's out of mind. I couldn't dream any further than where I was. I just wanted to focus in the now. We're going to a hockey game. We are going to present at the gala at school. And that's because I'm used to that environment. That is all I knew. So university was an out of sight, out of mind, out of reach concept for me altogether.
And you mentioned a lot of radio students, right? I mean, how did you try to manage your grades and work at the same time?
No. I wasn't, even in high school, I wasn't very concerned about being an overachiever. I wasn't very, you know, Andy, let's just pause for a minute. I just want to explain something to you. There are
Okay.
individuals, it's almost like I was just moving through life, right? You start at kindergarten, you go to kindergarten, you go to primary school, you go to high school, you go to varsity, and you work. That's sort of like what everybody says should happen in your life. And depending on your environment, some things will be more important than other things. To me,
Uh,
academics was like, as long as I'm passing each grade, good stuff, you know? I wasn't trying to get my 90s in maths. I wasn't trying to get my 60s in accounting or whatever the
oh.
aspirations are when it comes to academics. You understand? So I was literally just like I don't want to say a plastic floating, but I was just doing what the next thing. Oh, we passed grade 8, we passed grade 9, and now we're going to look for subjects. Oh, what are these subjects? What is life science? Oh, we dissecting stuff. Good, let's go there. That looks interesting. So when I got to varsity, what happened was the first week we were at the rag farm and the guys from the campus radio were going out saying, do you want to be on radio? Do you want to be on radio? The auditions are on this day, right? So working and academics just looked like the same thing. I was a media studies and journalism student and I was working in campus radio. That just looked like the same thing to me. So I wasn't aspirational about getting my 90s and my 80s in academics, but I was getting through. I mean, the only thing that bugged me was the psychology. It's like, what was wrong with my psychology studies? They were not coming together. Instead of doing a 3-year degree, I think I did it for 4 years. It could have been five. No, it was 4 years, you know.
Oh.
So yeah, I wasn't very obsessed about my academics. I just knew that for as long as I was passing and I was moving on to the next grade, that's really all that mattered to me.
You know what I like? You just flipped this interview around. We are skipping the university and the school and everything. Not to say that it doesn't matter, but I think
Yeah,
there is a lot we will
yeah.
learn from Keo, from her journalism career, and as well as the transition into the new thing. Please explain what journalism is to a 10-year-old. What do they need to do?
Okay. So, hello, Nana. So, journalism basically is what is it? What is journalism? Because I did a lot of research in journalism.
Mhm.
I remember we were studying how to do interviews in journalism, how to ask the provoking questions in journalism, how to get answers out of people. And to a certain degree, you were being taught about your work ethic, how hard it is to be in this industry and breaking through different barriers, you know. But essentially, to give you a more structured answer as to what exactly is journalism, let's see.
Mhm. Oh, so you're typing
So,
now.
the dictionary says, yes, I am. It's
Mm-hmm.
an activity or profession of writing for newspapers, magazines, or news websites and preparing news for broadcasting.
Mm-hmm.
That's the very definition of it. So we're writers, essentially, for different platforms of communication.
Did you used to write a lot? My understanding of journalism was, those, I'm not sure if those guys who ask people on the streets, like, what do you think of whatever?
It was given they called it street journalism at some point. So that's what they called it. Are you talking about the guys on TikTok?
Yeah, I mean, do I have to go to school for that, or can I just wake up with my phone and my mic and then I start people asking people, what did you eat
I
in the
would like you
morning
to
and
go to
stuff like
school for
that?
that. I would like you to go to school for that. I would like you to go to school if you wanted to become a journalist and do it correctly. Understand the ethical principle, the ethics and the principles of being a journalist, and understanding the socioeconomics that you're going, the society that you're going to be in. I would like you to please study
Mm-hmm.
journalism if you're going to. I know sometimes we look at certain degrees and go, I don't need a
Mm-hmm.
qualification for this, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but there's something very special about completing something academically. You know, there's something very special about getting that paper that says to you, you've done it. You've had the sleepless nights, you've worked the long hours, you understand the writing principles, you understand the different platforms of how things work. You understand? I know that now there are some careers that we look at and we think, you don't need to study for that. I could just wake up in the
Mm-hmm.
morning and be a content creator. I could just wake up in the morning and do marketing and PR. I can speak to people. You know, when I used to work in radio, people would say to me, I want to be on radio. I can talk for 3 hours straight. I'm like, there is way more to radio than just speaking for 3 hours straight. There is way more to journalism than just standing on the corner or whatever and saying, hey, Andy, so tell me about your day. It's how you're able to get the crucial information out of someone and give it to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ability to be the voice to the voiceless. You know, I remember that was my favorite line about journalism and broadcasting is that you were the voice to the voiceless, which meant that what people
Mm-hmm.
couldn't say or understand, you had to find a way to break down and really just make it palatable to the tongue and audible to the ear. You know, you and I can sit here and we can have this big discussion with these big words about podcasting and content production, and we can use all the fancy jargon, but our audience wouldn't understand what we're talking about because we have now segregated them from the conversation. We've outcast them from the conversation because we thought, hey, we're sitting here together, we're going to have a podcast and we're going to laugh and we're going to talk about engineering. But we forgot to make it something that anybody can understand. So going to school to study even the most basic is very, very important. It teaches you critical skills in thinking, in problem solving, in human interaction, and so forth. Yeah. So please go study it if you want to.
You spoke about ethics, and how much you get to learn most of those from the degree or the qualification that you did, right? So let's put a scenario here. Let's just say I'm your boss.
Mm.
Wherever you're working at Cator Media,
Yes.
right? And I now ask you to report on
Yes.
something that you totally believe the opposite of that. Say right now
Yes.
they want you to say you believe that this water in this cup is much nicer than the one that is in a a pink or yellow cup, and you totally believe on the opposite. How
Yes.
did you go about that?
So I understand the scenario that you gave me, but I want to say this to you. it's not
Mhm.
necessarily about what you believe in or what your opinion is. Sometimes it's honestly just about the
Mhm.
facts, you know. Um, Having to understand that I need to report on a certain topic, as uncomfortable as it is, if I can get
Mhm.
the right information out of it, then I was able to do my job. Sometimes we're faced
Mhm.
with scenarios as journalists where you'd rather not cover that story. It's either triggering for you, maybe you have no interest in it at all. You don't want to know about politics. You want to do journalism for fashion. You want to do journalism on art, and then your boss says, go do this politics. It's honestly up to you to do the correct research, understand the topic you're going to be talking about, find the facts about it, and navigate that conversation with absolute prowess. You have to.
In a case where somebody is
Yes.
doing bad reporting, what happens there? Is it somebody who's self-taught or somebody who just failed the ethics section in the exam so much, or is it just for money only?
Not when it's bad reporting, because there's a lot of scenarios that you could give me around bad reporting. Sometimes it's not about ethics, it's just always poor
Mhm.
information, poor research, poor understanding of the topic at hand. And that's how you end up with people fumbling and saying the wrong. Like maybe you and I are having this conversation, and you're like, "Hi, good morning, Olarato, the finance manager at at Cator," whereas I'm the
Mhm.
presenter at Cator. You understand? You just didn't do your research,
Yeah.
and you don't have the knowledge around that. But sometimes the person who's even feeding you the information, your content producer, might have got the whole content wrong. So that's where bad bad journalism would come from, or bad reporting would come from. It's just poor lack of knowledge and poor research.
With the first scenario, I was your manager, but right now, let's say I'm the guy that needs to go and do the researching for you. We
Yes,
had, I
yes,
think they call it a conflict, So I can definitely give you a wrong story, and then you go and say, "Good evening, Lerato, who's working at Cater X," and so then tell me your scenario or your
yes.
situation of how you handled being able to be a good team player, because I think that really matters. How did you go about it yourself, and how did you make sure that your journalism becomes not bad reporting?
Well, I mean, there's different forms of research. There's online research. There's where you go out and maybe do your surveys on whatever it is that you want to have a conversation about. So you would have to
Mhm.
do it always comes down to having the right research. Being a people's person does help, because it means sometimes you're
Mhm.
able to get somebody, when you're about to talk to someone, and I know that Andy is a very
Mhm.
um strict person, and getting him to be on my platform is going to be difficult. Having icebreakers with someone helps a lot as well. You know, being able to navigate confusing situations also helps a lot. I have been in situations as a content producer where I was asked to look for someone on a topic I had no idea on. And it would take me a bit
Mhm.
longer to get that person, because I needed to understand. Andy wants to talk to Keorapetse about her journey in journalism. Why? I mean, come on. Oh, jeez. I'd rather talk about, the latest AI products. But knowing that it's not about you, it's about the listener and the value of what the next person has to say. That's what makes the difference
Mhm.
between, I guess, a learned journalist and somebody just doing it for the funs of it. Understanding that this topic is not always about you. It's good. It's good to have topics where you are well knowledged in it. But what I've always come to notice
Mhm.
about topics while you're well knowledged as a presenter is that you tend to make it about yourself. You know more
Oh.
about sport. You know a lot about sports cars. You have a person who's coming into the radio, and we're talking about sports cars, and there you are going on and on and on, and the person who actually came in doesn't actually get to say much because you already know so much about it. So getting out of your comfort zone and doing conversations that are difficult to understand, to research on, but you're able to eloquently get it across, that's a very big skill. Yeah, it also it goes back to the whole people skills thing and researching that you're able to do it right and make it easy for the next person to understand.
What were some of your most interesting icebreakers that you used to put there?
Icebreakers depended on the conversation at hand. If I was getting the president of a social club to come speak to us, the conversation that will break the ice will obviously be around the topic of interest that we're going to be speaking to that person about. If I have any
Mhm.
other random knowledge on them, that was also helpful. It wasn't a matter of age group, it was more of a profession thing. If I'm going to be speaking to a political person, how do I
Mhm.
actually get them to hear me out without going, ah, you're a journalist, wena lona la sokodisa, hey, hey." You'd have to find the right words to say to that person. Sometimes you're only speaking to their
Mhm.
communications people, and that's where you build relationships, honestly. Once you're able to be in good books with the communications person at a specific
Mhm.
organization, it makes life a bit easier. For instance, Andy, what that means is if I had an organization and you wanted to talk to me
Mhm.
directly as the director of that organization, there would be my PR and media specialist who you would have to go through
Yes.
in order for you to get to me if you don't have a personal relationship with me. But also, even if you did, it's just nice to respect people's titles. To say, yes, I know
Yes.
Andy from LinkedIn, I could just pass on the message there. But Andy has protocols in place and people in place that I need to see through first before I decide to
Mhm.
bump into him and get an interview out of him. So essentially,
Okay.
icebreakers really depend on the person and the content we're going to be working on.
What was one of the most weirdest icebreaker you've ever said to anyone, or ever had, or ever been asked about?
I still cringe to this day. I still cringe to
Hmm.
this day when I think about I was in Cape Town, and I don't know if I'm allowed to mention the artist's names. The one that still makes me cringe to this day is his name is a Beverage,
Hmm.
right? So they
Hmm.
hand me the mic as a student and I had to do this icebreaker. And I say to this
Hmm.
person, so how do you like your coffee? Black or white? Because his name is a beverage. So I was like, so
But
how do you take your coffee? Black or white? And man, after that I was like, actually icebreakers are quite hard. I need to work on how you speak to people. But luckily for him, he was able to answer me. So I think he understood at that point that there's students in the building because we had to introduce ourselves as um the institution that we're from and why we're there and what the question was. My questions were great, but I still to this day feel like I should have never ever asked. But yeah, that was sometimes it gets a bit weird, and everybody's just like, what? No, don't do that. But people who are very used to being interviewed are able to navigate difficult questions themselves, just like people who are used to interviewing people are able to navigate difficult clients as well. I remember when we were studying, Michael Jackson was the hardest person to interview, and he was on Oprah's show, and he couldn't answer, like, he wasn't giving Oprah any of the answers that she wanted. She once called it one of the hardest interviews she had to do because Michael was just not receptive to anything she was saying. He was going that way, she's going that way, and managing that 30 minutes together is quite a skill in itself. Yeah.
now it's talking about the age group and people understanding each other. How important is it that I'm at a certain age group to the people that I'm going to interview, and how relevant is that? Is it a big thing, or is it like it doesn't matter at all?
It has nothing to do with age. We've interviewed people who are in their 90s, their 80s. We've interviewed people who are 12 years old, 13 years old
Mhm.
because of something very interesting they did. What you do need to do though is realize and read the room. That's very important. You can't go into a conversation with a 13-year-old like you would go into a conversation with a 60-year-old. You can't go into a conversation with a mechanical engineer the same way you'd go into a conversation with an artist or a political person. It's all about
Mhm.
context. It's all about understanding what the conversation at hand is all the time, and you just don't know it. You speak to people on LinkedIn with a different tone to the people you speak to on Facebook with a different tone. You speak to somebody younger than you in a different mindset than you do speak to somebody at your age, at your caliber, or above you. We always continuously reading the room and seeing that, oh no, I'm going to be speaking to, I don't know, my boss. You're obviously not going to go in there and go, you're my brew, even though sometimes I did do that myself. But it was just honestly about reading the room and stuff. Honestly speaking, I probably am as playful as you are. And I think that's what people need in life. We tend to forget that we're human, and we tend to let go of our childlike excitement personalities. Can't
Mhm.
find the right jargon for that. We tend to let go of our childlike excitement, right? Where you're gonna meet or do something exciting, but you want to keep this adult big face on the entire time. If I'm gonna speak to Andy on a podcast, I want to get really excited about it. I want to get comfortable with it because it's very important, So if you understand the space that you're in, you will be just fine. You don't have to only have conversations about motorsports because that's all you understand. You're allowed to push yourself further and say, listen, I'm going to talk about fashion. I'm going to talk about politics. That's how people grow, essentially, in any skill that you do. If somebody's watching this today and they are, pick a career quickly, engineers, right? And they're
Yes.
thinking of becoming content creators. Fantastic. For you, it makes sense somewhere along the line. Don't lose the excitement around that because the topic is difficult or the people in that industry are older than you or the environment is foreign to you. No, go in there, find your
Mhm.
place, and make it work. So that's the same thing we did with age differences. I never actually even realized that. It's something that you had to consider. All I wanted to do was have the right content and make it easy for anybody who was listening to the conversation to understand.
I've been trying to read the room for a very long time on TikTok. I just couldn't be doing those dances where, I do advertisements for Cator while I'm doing dances. I wish I could. I'm still looking for 2000 to keep me in sync with those. You put in a few points there on around some of the key lessons that you got to learn in your journalism career, right? So could you pick maybe your top, let's just say three of the most biggest lessons that you have learned?
So in terms of order, I don't have them in the right order, but one of the
Mhm.
lessons that I've learned about journalism and that I actually take with me in everything that I do is that sometimes it's not about you. It really isn't about you. You are at work to deliver a product. You understand what I mean?
Mhm.
If we went to work every
Mhm.
day with the emotions that we would like to go to work with, nothing would work out. Um, it's not about you when we're talking politics. It's about the facts. It's not about you when we are talking the economy. It's about the facts. Yes, you'd want to reel in journalism, you want to bring it home to say, what does a coalition government mean to a basic person or a man on the street? You understand? But it's really not about you. And egos are absolutely everywhere. It's not just because this person is on a billboard, they have a bigger ego than the managing director sitting in your office. They could have the same ego, and navigating that is so important because, especially as juniors, you find yourself in a
Mhm.
space where the older people or the guys with more experience tend to want to make it about them and their life lessons. And it's very difficult for you as an eager young person to show them the ropes. You can imagine now for a 2000, as you like to call them, sitting at an office and nobody's using ChatGPT right now. Nobody's understanding AI. And you are somebody going to the office and trying to show your boss that, listen, with AI, we can do this. At some point,
Mhm.
sometimes our leaders forget that you hire people because they bring in something different.
Mhm.
So the first one is it's not about you. The second
Okay.
one would be reading is so important. Reading is
Okay.
Absolutely so important. Reading, if you're not reading, you're just consuming information, even if it's only about things that you like. If you are, like you say, a TikToker and you want to get your brand proper on TikTok, do the proper research. Go to TikTok University. It's a real thing. Don't start laughing. Go to TikTok
Mhm.
University, learn what the professionals that TikTok have picked are saying about
Mhm.
trends, about hashtags, about how oftentimes you have to post. You understand? If you
Mhm.
are somebody who likes accounting and you're feeling like you're not getting enough, then you read, then you follow the right people on your social media platforms, and you follow the right podcasts, and you follow the right digital newspapers. You continuously want to consume something that is of value to you, because that's how you grow and that's how you become an expert in something. I see that a lot these days, that people are expert
Mhm.
at things. One more thing that I've learned from journalism is humility. It's very important. Always trying to be somebody who is empathetic or sympathetic to other people in a situation. I think people dread speaking to people like politicians, and we
Mhm.
forget that politicians are doing their job. Yeah, it's daunting that this person is applying to be a mayor, and you're realizing that they might just loot the money. Some people get into careers because they had a passion to begin with, because they thought they could solve a problem. Somebody wants to be a podcaster because they feel like the voice around a specific topic is not heard. And being sympathetic to people who are going through things at different times. I would sometimes watch people have conversations as journalists, and I would think, geez, man, you could have been kinder in your conversation. There was no need for you to be
Mm.
so harsh, even though sometimes it's necessary, but people are people, and people come first, and you are absolutely nobody without people. So being kind to people it's important.
Let's say we had a Cator Enterprise, for example. Cator Enterprise was founded by
Yes.
my great 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 grandpa, right? And ever since, Creator Enterprise
Yes.
has employed these people who are too resistant to natural evolution.
Mm,
And I mean, even in general, the culture maybe decided not to also evolve. But then now they want this new 2000 to come
mm.
and work for them. This new 2000 comes and open a chat GPT. And everybody in the room looks at them like, what are you doing? How can they go about it?
With the younger generation, when it comes to
Mhm.
trying to become a part of an enterprise, especially, I think enterprise is a good word, with their older companies, people like to see results. So maybe the approach shouldn't be, hey boss, let's use AI to get our numbers up. No, try and do a
Mhm.
small little project by yourself where you're able to show the numbers that, listen, boss, we don't have TikTok, but I did my TikTok and I used some of the elements from the company to show people, and I got like 6,000 likes. What you need to give, say, if we got 6,000 likes, the 6,000 likes can maybe become a lead for something, or it can mean that we are now able to integrate into a different market as a spillover. I know that with the younger generation, or with some people, not let's not say the younger generation, people want to walk in and be
Mhm.
accepted without even putting in the effort of what it means to be accepted by a particular company. So we're always excited to work in spaces where we feel like we will have impact and stuff like that. But sometimes the easiest way to get the older guys in the company, the silver foxes in the company, to understand what you're trying to show them is to show them results, show them graphs. That's the best thing. If you can't honestly, if this person is very resistant, show them that you gave me something to do that would have taken me 4 hours. It took me 30 minutes. You understand? And now I want our company to move in that direction where we are pushing more leads at less time. So we're doubling on everything on less time. So, as a young person, as somebody who feels like it's a bit of a resistance at work, you need to change your strategy then. Look at what makes this person feel like it's working. You're in a company and this guy's like, no, 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 no. This is how we've done it for the longest time. If you're able to successfully show them that we can navigate the same platforms or the same results this way, let's do it. But don't give up. I see it a lot with the younger generation talking so openly about their mental health and where they are socially and stuff. And you'll hear the older people, unfortunately, I know this might irk a few people, say they're just not strong enough, to handle
Yep,
corporate. But they are. It's just that people are not giving them the space to be strong in their ability. You bring a young
I
person in
see.
very vibrant, very eager to work, and after 3 weeks, this person realizes the culture's not for me, and nobody's even trying to hear me out, what's going on. Then maybe sometimes, as the people who are trying to be heard, we should try use a different form of communication to get the message across.
You don't want to tell these young ones to be diehard, even though it's very difficult, right? I mean, so,
No.
and as well, you don't want to tell them as well not to give up way too early, right? So it's one of it's that balance. It's like, okay,
Yes.
give up if you feel like this is taking way too much than you can give, and also don't give up too early, because if you give up too early, you're just a person that gives up on life. Like you don't want to come across difficult things and at least maybe try to navigate that. So in your own words, how long do you think is long enough before I give up after trying to show this POC to my boss? How long do you think is long enough for me to stay?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, hey, because it depends on an individual's threshold to handle certain things. It depends on
Mhm.
people's resilience. And
I see.
I don't want to say passion because passion will kill you sometimes, but it depends on
100%.
people's ability to handle certain things and certain environments. Some people are very strong, and I really admire people who can come in and be like, I've been here for 3 months, this is not going to work for me. Right? But I also admire people who come in and say, I've been here for 6 years and I've made these changes and it wasn't that easy. So it really is an individual thing where you're saying, this is where my capacity is at. This is where it stops for me. Some people push through it till the very end and realize when it's very late that I should have just left
Mhm.
when the first three red flags came up, and three is still a lot. There are people who will tell you that, yeah, after the three red flags, I had a good conversation with my HR. And this is the direction we took after that. People were kinder, people were willing. It really just depends on how much you're willing to give a fight.
Give the fight for as long as you still have the energy to stay in the fight. Don't let the fight start draining your energy,
Absolutely.
your everyday energy on normal things. Like if it's starting to affect how you and your friendships are going, or you and your family, or you as a person, like if you happen to sit with yourself and
Hmm.
then you start hating yourself, then maybe just know that we're gonna go to the interesting questions. These are just small, straightforward questions. You tell me this or that. Do you think the era of newspapers is still gonna be there, or do you think it's dead? And why? For 5 marks.
That's so
I know
sad.
you said you didn't really like the school thing, but yeah, let's go back to school. 5 marks.
We're not even seeing enough newspapers on shelves anymore. It's so
Okay.
it's so heartbreaking how even with not even just newspapers like CDs, vinyls came back as a trend, not as a thing. It's very sad, and I don't want to say that newspapers are gonna die. It's scary,
Mhm.
but I think they might. Some are
It is what it is.
hanging on, for dear life. But I think
Hmm.
even the newspaper companies will tell you that we're not producing as much newspaper as we used to anymore.
Yeah.
The because the problem with the newspaper is that by the time you publish, everybody knows the
Hmm.
story. You know, dude, you are here as the content, as the journalist, and you're putting together this well-written, beautiful piece that's going to be on the
Hmm.
6 o'clock news paper in the morning.
Hmm.
And by the time people are reading through it, if you're lucky, we're just fact checking against platforms. Against radio, we're fact checking against Twitter, we're fact checking against Google to see if Andy wrote a good story, if he gave us a different angle, maybe. But even with that, there's still digital platforms for newspapers. I used to follow a few newspapers, and they were very good with clickbait and hooks. The headline would be so impressive, and then they'd say, "Find it tomorrow in the in the newspaper in tomorrow's edition of the Andy Press." That was fantastic. But I could also find my way around the facts. That's the thing. It was
On
nice that
TikTok,
Andy
on
Press would
Twitter
be
actually.
like, the headline is this. The headline is this, and you're going to read about a paragraph of that, and then they'll say, find it tomorrow in tomorrow's release. And that's where the rest of the story is. But things are moving so fast that tomorrow's release is old, and
I
I
see.
think it's just that people still maybe use it because of community content. I see where I stay now, I can find a lot of content about my community because of newspapers. Maybe it's because I don't know where to look digitally for them, but I'm finding a lot about what my community is doing through these free little newspapers that you'll get at the newsstand. But the age of
I see.
newspapers is a tricky one. It's the same conversation that might be going on in different spheres right now about the age of radio and where it's going, with everybody having access to podcast devices, with everybody having access to content. Why do we still listen to radio? Some people used to listen to radio because it had all of your favorite jams, but now you've got streaming sites, You used to listen to radio because of, I don't know, whatever. Some are still there because it depends on where you are in life, what you prefer. So it's the same conversation, newspapers versus digital platforms, radio versus podcast. Do we still need radios? Everybody's got an opinion on something. What is your brand doing
Yeah,
to stay relevant to people in the industry that they're in, whether it be press or broadcasting?
I see. I see. Okay, so then do you think then journalism is still relevant? I mean, we have a guy probably staying at the corner of your complex asking, "How was your breakfast? I saw you eating your breakfast," and that guy didn't even go to school for that. Do you think then mainstream media then still becomes relevant? And no, this is a real question. I have a follow-up question to that. But do you still think it's
Yes,
relevant? I mean,
absolutely.
if as Andy like this, I can put up a website right now and then put content, put some ads there, write a story that is true and real, and then publish it. A job that probably 10 years ago it would have been done by a team of 5 people, literally a reporter, a
Yes.
researcher, the guy who's going to print out the papers, the guy who's going to deliver it, and probably maybe some other guy who's going to read it or something like that. So do you still think then mainstream media is
Yeah,
still relevant to the majority, and do you still think obviously journalism is still a thing if I can just teach myself to be a journalist?
it is. It's very, very important because there's a certain quality that is required for you to get the correct conversation going. You can decide that you're going to stand as Andy and you're going to have these random conversations about what did you eat for breakfast. It's still very, very important that people understand that quality journalism, especially now with deep fake news and with AI and with everybody able to give out, there's deep fake and there's fake news, right? So with deepfake, it's where Donald Trump is moving around at a strip club and it's actually a fake video. It just looks a lot like him. And then you've got fake news that are generated by anybody, anywhere, who has the ability to upload a website, create a website quickly, Andy Press, and there he is spewing whatever they like to do. It's very important that people understand that their careers as journalists is still very, very important to the communities, especially where they are, and to the communities that they're trying to reach. You understand? And by communities, I don't mean only communities, but if you are a journalist in motorsports, how valuable you are to people who still look up to you for the correct content and research. You must remember with AI, for instance, somebody's training that thing to give you the answers. So somebody has to be doing the correct form of research. If I Google now, Andy, and there have been 4 or 5 stories about you in the press, how sure am I that they're all correct? Hopefully they were written by a human being who had the skills to do it, who had the experience to share your story correctly. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I cringe at what I see in what is known as mainstream media, where the headline says, a political leader gets into a Twitter spat with someone, and all you're getting is just screenshots of then he said this, then he said that, and then they said that, and it's just quotations and pull out quotes everywhere. And I'm like, there's a sense of we are now reducing journalism on certain platforms to just Twitter quotes, right? Whereas
Yeah.
there could have been so much depth in a journalist going, hey, political leader, what was the story behind this? And hey, person who got bashed by political leader, do you want to sit down and have this conversation and let's iron things out so people understand where you were coming from? You understand? So I still believe that journalism has a place, and there's a lot of amazing stories out there that have to be told still. Remember, journalism is just not about politics and the horror stories that are in every country. It's not, even though they say it sells more than the good news, but there's so many
Yeah.
beautiful things happening in the communities that you live in way at home. You're missing out on so much information about this granny doing that, those people raising funds for themselves to pave the road, maybe, or this community is taking these kids to school. We still require quality journalism out there because there are amazing stories to be told, hopeful stories to be told. Some, if we're going to stick to politics, some good political stories are being told, but they're on the 6th page if they're in the newspaper because it doesn't sell as much as a bad or a dramatic, a negative political story,
One.
but it's still a story that needs to be
I
told
see.
correctly nonetheless.
I got to a point where, from my Twitter, I started blocking a few political stories. At some point, I got into the rabbit hole of following political stories. Over time, I started seeing that it looks like I'm also getting emotional about this whole thing. But politics is a game, so they say, the big guys, right? So then I started just kind of blocking them,
Yeah.
and I tried to follow some other people, either somebody who's doing organic farming or somebody who's just doing something random. I do think as well, at some point, as people, you need to kind of gauge from time to time, more especially with journalism, not just journalism, but rather with the content that is being put out there, to say, gauge whether this is still keeping your energy at a high or you are getting too angry a bit more. So why did you switch your career? I think we can just talk about this for a few minutes. Why did you switch your career, and what did you think it was the right thing to do?
I switched careers because I had been doing content production and research for so long that I wanted to see if I could do anything else. Was this the end of
Okay.
me? Am I just going to be somebody who's continuously talking on radio and researching, or could I be or do something else? I switched because it was time to try something new, basically, without getting into the nitty-gritties of things. But there comes a point in your life when if you can do it in your sleep, yeah, maybe you should consider getting something that's going to really ignite that passion for learning, that passion for discovering.
I see. Yeah, just to give people context of what that career is. Looks like Kia decided that she wants to be more of a software engineer than more into journalism. There's nothing wrong with that. Why didn't you just open your own podcast or your own radio or your own thing and then start to branch out? I mean, for me, technology is far-fetched from journalism. I mean, you could have went for
Yes.
psychology. You could have went back to nursing.
So, a few things. We had
Hmm.
COVID. One reason
Okay.
why tech became very interesting was because how do we navigate life without touching each other? How do we navigate life without being in the same space? What is going on?
Hmm.
When they pulled that rug from underneath our feet and we thought we had another 5 years to learn how to use Teams, another 5 years to, shop with tellers, it was
Hmm.
so scary when you had to walk around with your masks on and you had to be in work from home environments and you realized, wow, tech is so powerful. But also, there was a
Hmm.
gentleman called Itumeleng Bahetane, who was somebody that we would interview regularly in our featured segments about tech and what was going on with
Hmm.
technology in different spaces when new apps came out, when new updates came out, and so forth. And then there was another gentleman called Joe. Joe runs a tech hub in Mahikeng who would also come in and we would speak to him especially about Joe, we're stuck. We realize that we're in the fourth industrial revolution. How do we integrate
Hmm.
tech into tourism? Next week, we're talking about how do we integrate tech into agriculture. Next week, we're talking about how do we integrate tech into broadcasting more than what we're
Hmm.
already doing, and so forth. So they were the
Yes.
standard influences, the very, very big. Those three that I mentioned were the big influences in me moving into tech, understanding
Okay.
what does this tech thing mean. Okay, building websites is one of them, building mobile apps is another thing,
Hmm.
being able to
Hmm.
build robots, interactive devices is another thing. I was so mind blown at how one of the fast food joints had a no human interaction, a pop-up store where the
Hmm.
robots were bringing your burger out. And I think there was like one or two people in there to manage the robots in case something went wrong.
Hmm.
But you realized that you needed to be in a space where you were future-proofing yourself, right?
Hmm.
Preparing yourself for something that was going to be completely different. Just today, I went
Hmm.
shopping and there was no teller. I had always heard about the store,
Ah.
how there's no teller and you just put your things in a basket. And yeah, I'm in South Africa, don't worry. So I went to a clothing store today and I had to do it myself, the whole thing, where I put the item that I bought into a little square basket thing. It scanned it and I had
Hmm.
to pay and I left.
Hmm.
And I realized that if we're not preparing ourselves for the next thing while enjoying what we have now, we're going to find ourselves redundant and it's very scary. You don't want to find yourself in a place where you have been doing things this way for the last 20 years and now you have to integrate
Hmm.
ChatGPT and you feel like your life is falling apart. It's not. Calm down, firstly. Just learn how to use the thing
Hmm.
and you'll be fine. But it was those three influences and the fact that I wanted to future proof myself.
I mean, with what you just said right now, there is this big fear, even to me as well. I get so scared starting out something new that I'm not good at. More especially given that I was an expert or very good in this one thing. I mean, let's put me when I started doing content creation. If you go and look at my first video, yeah, you probably would laugh. My editing and the way I was saying things, I was still pretty nervous and all those kind of things. So, how did you, for yourself, navigate that whole things to say, I mean, 10 years is a lot of time. I've not reached 10 years working actually myself, right? 10 years, it's a lot of time in a certain field. How did you navigate from 10 years and all the way to shrink? Were you not nervous? How did you set your mind different as well?
So let's start with how did I manage the transition? I remember I was sitting in the parking lot, and I said to myself, just use the same mindset you had when you studied journalism. Remember, journalism wasn't my first um, love or my first idea, but I saw it through. The one thing was that we started this thing, let's finish it, you know? So I used the same mindset that I had in varsity. I didn't know what journalism was when I was in varsity. I was in a completely different province, doing something I had no idea could be done. And I saw myself through it. I saw myself through it. I was in the right communities throughout the entire thing. I was on radio. I would hang out with the guys who were doing our campus newspaper. I hung out with different people who had different conversations around journalism. I did the same thing. I got to campus in Pugeng. We were the first 50 students to be taught software engineering. And in my class, I was one of the oldest people in my class, right? And I was with all these young kids who were showing me that, hey, did you try? I remember when I first saw ChatGPT, we'll get into that, but I used the same mindset to say that you didn't know anything about
Mm-hmm.
journalism. And
Mm-hmm.
you put yourself in that space and you made it work. So therefore, you're going to use the
Mm-hmm.
same mindset to get through your tech career.
That's crazy. So, and then what were some of the most useful skills that you find from that side? Because I mean, in I think this is one thing that people don't get to understand. In software engineering, people think that if you are very good with your tech skills, then it will mean you progress very well. I always tell people that is completely wrong. You need to be good
Absolutely.
enough. You need to be good with your
Yes.
technical skills, know your
Yes.
job, be able to get the job done. But then the soft skills will make you ride that wave like it was never there before. Because to start with, for you to understand the problem that a
Yes.
customer has in the first place, you need to be a very good listener. You need to be a very good,
Mm-hmm.
what do we call this thing? A question prompter. Like you need to be able to prompt some sort
Yes.
of information in a different view from somebody else and all those kind of things. I mean, how did you use those? And I mean, that's are you facing customers? Are you not? I mean, what are some of the top three or whatever skills that you find super useful from your previous career into software engineering?
Well, like you said, and I'm so happy you actually brought this up because a young man is asking me, how did I get a job in tech
Mm-hmm.
straight out of, well, I was in a boot camp. Let's just get that out there. I was in a
Mm-hmm.
boot camp. How did I get a job
Okay.
straight out of boot camp? And one of the most essential things that I'm realizing is that the ability to communicate is so vital and people take it so lightly. I always never considered myself as a very good developer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I would watch people on YouTube and they were doing so well in how they were programming that I always had the imposter syndrome. Is something that a lot of developers will go through. But
Mm-hmm.
communication and research was so important in how I was able to navigate the tech space, communication,
Mm-hmm.
problem solving, understanding. This is the thing around prompting the right question, problem solving,
Yes.
because you are
Yes.
sitting with a client or you're sitting with a bug. Let's actually not even say a client. You're sitting with a bug.
Mm-hmm.
When I press the green button, my screen is supposed to go
Mm-hmm.
blue, but it's going red.
Mm-hmm.
Now you start
Okay.
asking yourself the different questions. What's causing this? Where do I start? Right? So you have to use your problem solving skills. Your communication
Uh-huh.
skills are vital in expressing yourself and your abilities. Ne? But having problem solving skills, having the ability to interact with people at different levels as a developer is very, very important. I see a lot of people where, and I'll take an example from my class, who coded every single day, just like I did, every single day, weekend in, weekend out, they were coding. But if you said to me,
Mm-hmm.
to one person, hey, can you explain this code base to me? It just goes pear-shaped. You can't explain your code base. Not that you didn't write it, but you just
Yes.
your articulation is not there. Your ability to break it down from this is a JavaScript concept and this is a function about clicking a blue button. Your ability to
Mm-hmm.
articulate that code so that somebody else can understand it is not there because you
100%.
don't speak to people about tech. You don't speak to people about what your code is doing all the time. When you're sitting in code
Mm-hmm.
reviews, you're unable to articulate what you're saying. It would be up to the coach to then guide you to say, oh, this is how you should probably better say it. And not learning from those guidances is another thing as well.
Okay. Okay. I think communication and problem solving, those are the things that you believe are some of the best skills really to put out there. This is my last question. I promise this is the last one. With this whole interview that we had for 1 hour, 30 minutes, did I do well in getting the right information? If I was doing journalism with you back in, I don't know which years, but yeah, was I going to pass and was I going to get my qualification? Did I do well?
I mean, you are new to the space. I'll start there. And I didn't give you much research to go on. Let's talk about Andy's processing, guys. So Andy sends a form and you have to fill it in.
Yes.
And his questions, I was just like, no, I don't have anything interesting to say actually, But you did so well in handling and doing your follow-up questions. The ability to listen, think, and write, and then come back with a
Mm-hmm.
question. You're going to master the skill around asking the question in a shorter format without winding it out. You'll get the hang of that as well. So you're doing very well. I appreciate that you are listening to what I'm saying and not just, sometimes this happens. You prepare 10 questions for me. And then I get in and I'm like, hi, I'm Keorapetse. And unintentionally, I answer all 10 questions because they're in a short statement. And then you're looking at me like, you answered all my questions. I have nothing else for you. You are also very knowledgeable on different conversations. It was good that you were eager to say, "Oh, you moved from one thing to another. Oh, how did you do that?" It means that you are learning that people are moving in different directions. I'll tell you why I say this. The other day I was listening to the radio, and I don't do it often anymore,
Mm-hmm.
but presenters were about to have a segment, but they couldn't get a
Mm-hmm.
hold of the person they were going to interview, and they're already on air, and you could hear the discomfort in trying to navigate from this person didn't come into let's talk about something and then play music. Oftentimes we rely
Yeah.
on the content that we're given so much that we're unable to move if there's a hiccup in the road. I'll listen to radio and somebody didn't pitch or something didn't go right and they can't instantly bounce back from that. You can hear them on touching the desk and it's like, she's not here yet. So in the meantime, let's play music. After a while, you'll get used, they should by now be used to the fact that Andy didn't pitch up, guys, but this is the conversation we're going to have.
Mm-hmm.
Let's play music. Some people are still a bit touch and go around that. So being knowledgeable on the conversation you're about to have is so good. So as time goes on, you'll also realize what you like to talk about and what you don't like to talk about. You're in a very fortunate space where it's up to you. You can have conversations only about things that matter to you. Or you can
Mm-hmm.
decide, I'm going to try and talk to a neuroscientist about
I see.
neurochips and how these things that are going to be in our brains are going to work. And I'm going to, hammer it
Mm-hmm.
out. I will listen in and I'll try and get it out of it. You're at a point where whatever content you want to have is honestly up to you. And how you drive the conversation is honestly up to you. You don't have to be, I guess, as depending on what you want to achieve with this platform, as professionally
Mm-hmm.
journalist as I was. But you're
Yeah.
doing pretty well. And I appreciate that you do put in the effort to say, this is me, this is what I do, and this is where I want to go.
Otherwise, that is all that I had for today. And I really, really appreciate your time. This was very informative, and I believe somebody who's in journalism and probably want to move in software engineering or software engineering back to journalism, whatever they want to do, they would find this very, very insightful. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Andy.